Good afternoon and welcome again to another of the Veterans Forum programs wherein we have had the pleasure and the honor of interviewing and sharing some of the experiences of these guys and gals in the various wars from World War II, Korea, Vietnam, the Desert Storm, and whatever else we're in. The program is set up to ask people, service personnel, particularly the women if they will, if they can and will, to share some of their experiences and how it's impacted on their life. But more important, in my analogy, what we're trying to do, in effect, if you will visualize one humongous puzzle. And each one of us is a piece of that puzzle. The more that we can have to come and share their experiences, the more we can fill in that picture. So people now, our friends and our family and people after us, will be able to understand what really happened. We're not all heroes as such. We didn't do this and didn't do that. But every guy and gal who had a job to do did it. And that's what we're trying to record. For those of you who haven't heard about it, give us a call at the station. The trailer will show you where, when, and how. If you have someone, friend, family, whatever, who is a veteran, and you feel you could induce them to at least come forward, please. I ask you, we beg you, because we want to make sure that every guy and gal does have a fair shot. Today is a crack-a-dack show. You see, I've got so much stuff here that we could spend 3 hours just talking about it. I don't mean to embarrass the young man. And I say young because I'm a couple of years older than he is. But it's another example of what some guy did when he did it and the results of what it was. I'll ask Dan to introduce himself. We'll take it from there. If you will, young man, you're on. Your name, if you will, spell your last name.
My name is Daniel Everett Kibe, K-I-B-E. I was born in Elizabeth, Pennsylvania, 1940.
Back up, excuse me, that's fine. We'll get to that later. I'd like to find out first, though, where do you now live? What branch of service, or services, if you will, were you in and when, so that we can at least say, here you are today, and then we'll work how you got here.
Okay. I live in Northampton, Massachusetts, right down the road. I've been there since I got out of the Army, and I decided I needed to use the GI Bill and go to school and get some learning.
Oh, you get learning, good learning?
Yes.
Okay.
I work for the University of Massachusetts, the Food Science Department, where I am a technical specialist. I'm married to my wife, Carolyn.
Okay.
I've been married 28 years this past May 15th.
Good.
And that's...
Okay, now let's go back and answer my first question.
Okay.
What branch were you in, and what were your service dates and your highest rank when you were discharged?
I was in the Army February 14th, 1971 to February 15th, 1973. And I was an infantryman, 11B. That was during the Vietnam War. I got out of the Army and said I never, ever would do this again because I didn't have such a great time in the Army. So fast forward 17 years, and for my midlife crisis, I joined the Air Force Reserve.
That was
on a whim.
Okay, on a whim and a prayer.
Yes.
It's a bad day. Okay. Where is that?
I joined the 74th AES, which is the Aeromedical Evacuation Squadron out of Westover, Massachusetts.
Okay. All right, fine.
And there I excelled all the way up to E7 Master Sergeant. Okay.
Now, I may ask you to explain some of the acronyms because
Sure.
I was back when you had a rate and they had some insignia. You guys, your E's and your O's. Okay, bear with us if you will. But you got to learn us something.
Okay.
So we got to learn too. Now, what was your basic, if you will, Air Force training? Because Air Evac is something we'd like to know about. What was your specialty and how did you do it?
I wanted a career change and I wanted to become a nurse. Well, I couldn't quit work to become a nurse because I didn't have any money. And someone said, well, why don't you join the reserves and they'll give you the money and all that. Yeah. So I went and they said they needed med techs, which could be considered a nurse's aide. So I said, all right, that's the first step, getting medical experience and knowledge. And I said, okay, I'll do it. And in the civilian world, that would be more like an EMT, emergency medical technician,
good.
where we usually take care of sick and wounded. In the beginning, before all the wars, it was transporting dependents and veterans. But then once the war broke out,
Which war? We've had 1,000 of them.
Desert Storm, Desert Shield. I just returned to the service then, so I did not really participate in those other than just training, because I came in November of 1990. Okay. So the war, as you know, was up and over with before you even knew it. So for a number of years, all we did was train. We did hospital training, we did emergency medical training, and then when things started to heat up, wars come and go. Wars die down. Wars are cold. Wars are hot. I went to Kuwait, to a base called Ali al-Salam, where I did medical evacuation. That was around 2000, and the politics and the geopolitics were starting to really crank up. Then I went to Kosovo for the Bosnia-Herzegovina problem, and then came back and did nothing, and then, except for train. Then around 2003 is when as you know, the war had already started, and I went to Germany to do my first aeromedical evacuations in and out of, I refer to it as Baghdad, but it's basically Iraq. And then I did that for 2003. Then in the fall of 2004, I went to Ramstein, Germany, where we flew aeromedical evacuation missions in and out of Iraq, Kuwait, and Afghanistan.
A lot of back and forth stuff. Huh?
A lot of flying.
Yeah.
Okay. My job is to fly inter and intra theater to go and pick up sick and wounded, and then that have been wounded have been given X amount of care, enough to get them out of theater.
Okay, to stabilize them.
Right. Stabilize them enough so that they can fly in a particular aircraft. And then we fly them, we'll say, from Afghanistan back to Ramstein. They go to a place called Launch Stool Hospital where they get more definitive care. And then they get flown back to the United States, which was also part of my job. And then if you were from California or Hawaii, you would go to Walter Reed in Bethesda, get more definitive care, enough to get you back to your home station, where I'll say that your own people, and most of all your family's there, so to get them back to their home station as soon as possible.
That's a good build up. Now what I'd like to do, if we can, to find out, where did you start? Like, for example, where were you born and when, and how was life growing up when you were a kid? Did you have any idea that you were going to end up, if you will, in the medical world, or were you just growing up? Did you go to college, high school, and that kind of stuff, to fill in the background?
I was born in Elizabeth, Pennsylvania, 1949. My mother, for other reasons, moved to Springfield, Massachusetts. I grew up on Carew Street, Upper Carew Street, Upper Springfield. I went to the regular elementary schools, Samuel Bowles. I went to Van Sickle Junior High School. From there, my parents decided that it was just too rowdy, and this is back in the 50s and 60s. So they moved lock, stock, and barrel to Westfield, Massachusetts, where at that time there were only 5 houses on my street, and the street is probably 3 miles long.
Oh, densely populated.
So for a 12, 13-year-old kid, we were moving out to the sticks.
Uh-huh. Okay.
So then I went to Westfield Junior High, Westfield High School. I am literally a draft dodger. I did my best not to get drafted.
You didn't do a good job?
No. So I went to Holyoke Community. Then I went to STCC. And this is when both of them were just starting. Springfield Technical.
Okay.
Technical Community
You got to
College.
give me the
Okay.
the whole bit.
And then
What was your? I mean, interrupt. But what was your major? Did you have a major, or were you just going to college as such?
all of the above. In Holyoke Community, I was an art major.
Okay.
In STCC, Springfield Tech, I believe it or not, I wanted to do computers. Computers were just starting to come up. They were something new, and I figured it was a new field. It'd be great to
Yeah. Get on the ground floor and grow with it. Yeah.
Yep. And but I'm not a student. I hated school. I hated the fact that at the end of the day, you still had more to do.
Oh yeah.
So I dropped out, and then in the end of 1970, I got a letter saying, "Greetings, come on down." And
The president wants you.
yes. So I literally ran out of excuses, and in those days, it was not unusual for people to go to Canada. It was not unusual
okay.
for.
All right.
So some friends said that they would take me. Whatever I wanted to do was up to
Okay.
me. And my parents said that they would back me whatever I wanted to do. But I said, no, I've run out of excuses. I'll do what's required of me. So on February 14th or 15th, 1971, I went down to Springfield and I was drafted.
Okay. Where'd you get into the service? How did you get there? Just your dad dropped you down and said, "Okay, sign up, and we'll come and pick you later on." Or what was the introduction from civilian life into the rigors of military life?
My mother dropped me off in Springfield with a whole bunch of other people down to what's called the MEP Center, which is a military entrance facility. There they said, "Okay, hang around here. We're going to get on a bus and we're going to go to Fort Dix." So, the best of my recollection, I got on a bus with a whole bunch of other folks. We drove to Fort Dix. We got there, if I remember right, it was early morning, and let the yelling begin, because it was get your butts off the bus and move it.
Yeah, it belongs to me now.
Yeah. Smoking like a fiend. And I did my basic training at Fort Dix, New Jersey.
Okay. And what was that like?
I hated it.
I know that no one ever said I just spent my liberty just running the obstacle course, but how was it? How did you really feel? Were you excited, disappointed, or undecided?
Nervous.
Okay.
I don't think any young kid, although I was 21 at the time, is used to having people yell at you, scream at you, "Let's go, let's move it." Being told what to do, get up at 4, and work all day, and then have chow, which I remember I wasn't all that great, and then do more weapons cleaning and boots shining and bed making, and then, if I remember right, I used to go to bed the first chance I got, whether it be 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, or whatever, but it just seemed like I could never get enough sleep. Yeah. So that's where I got my regular basic training, which was, as we get older, we look at things differently. It was a lot of PT, a lot of marching, a lot of physical training.
Okay, what about the armament side? Guns, training, manual of arms, shooting, what kind of weapons?
In basic training was mostly M16s. They had just were phasing out the M14s. They were mostly gone, but there were a few still around. So we were training on M16s for, which would have been all of February, March, and some of April.
Okay. They had to qualify or just get experience?
Everybody has to qualify, and you have to get to a certain level of proficiency. It was, for a while, it was going out to the rifle range 5 days a week, and just so that you would shoot, and shoot some more. Okay. Whether it be stationary targets, pop-up targets, some moving targets, but weapons safety, weapons familiarization, and that type of
Now,
stuff.
before that, though, in civilian life, way back when you were a youngster of 18 or so, did you do stuff like hunting or any kind of armament where gun shooting before then, so you had some experience or no experience when you got there.
Minimal. I was never a hunter. I was more of a fisherman, you know, like all teenagers. My weapons experience would have been a 22 or a 410 shotgun, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
But my parents, both of them, hated weapons. So therefore, there were no
guns around.
No guns around.
Good.
So that anytime I did shoot, it was my friends that had weapons, and I would borrow theirs.
Okay, all right. Now, while you were in boot as such, was it about 8, 10 weeks, 12 weeks? How
It was 1 week, which is called 0 week, and that's the week that doesn't count. That's the you go through the lines, you get your shots,
shots and all
your
the stuff
clothing
thrown
and
at
all
you,
that, and then it was 8 weeks of boot camp.
Okay. You had the classic KP and all that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
fire watch, night watch. How did you take that?
My parents had a dishwasher, so
My mother had one too. There it is.
well, when I was younger, we all had to take turns of washing dishes and drying dishes. But it was a family of 5. It was never a family of 150. And to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go to the chow hall and start washing and serving, it was an eye opener.
Okay.
And a lot of it was not as automated as it is today.
Oh, well, things improve. Now, getting back to your childhood, if you will, did you have any brothers or sisters, and were any of them in the service as such?
I have an older sister, Linda, and I have a younger brother Donald, who has since passed away and was never in the service.
No.
That being said, except for my brother and my mother's youngest brother, every male member of my family has been in the military.
Wow. So there's a long line.
Yep. It starts with Korea. I had 2 uncles there. Myself, my brother's 3 boys. David is in Afghanistan now. His middle son, Joe, is in Ramstein, Germany now. And his youngest one, Donald Jr., is in the Coast Guard at Lake Charles, Louisiana.
Wow.
Yeah. So military runs in my family.
Good. Okay. Now, you showed me something before. Do I have it here? That picture. What did we do? I'm sorry, I looked.
Of
the father.
Right here?
Yeah, explain it. This is to kind of build a little history, because this guy's just loaded with good stuff in my book. Okay.
I am married to Carolyn Gray Yancey from a little town called Palmyra, Virginia. I met her because she works at the university along with myself. Her father, Wallace Gray, was in the Army during World War II.
Okay.
And he died tragically in the early 50s. So even though that my extended family, there's military people in that, and I'd always like to mention the people and the service people that went before us.
Yeah. They made what we have today.
Yes, and you give them credit. It was tough then. It's tough now, but I believe it's tougher then.
Why?
We have a professional military today, where they had the conscripts then, where people are treated differently then. People also put up with a lot more then. The conditions were different.
Politically as well.
Politically, the equipment's different. The expectations are different. So when you see those black and white movies, if you have any military background, you have an appreciation for what those men and women went through.
Mm-hmm. Good. Okay. Now, when you were in boot, did you have any sort of a selection as to what you were going to train for, like your primary MOS? Or were you just a grunt being trained to say yes sir, no sir, and that kind of stuff? When did you have your selection, if you will?
In the MEP station, in Springfield where they induct you and they fill out all the paperwork, the woman said, "What would you like to be?" And I don't know, you know, what's the military? And she said, "Okay, infantry." And that's how I became an infantryman. Once I got to basic training, there are so many other career fields besides infantry. My mouth dropped. Because you could be a tank driver, you could be a truck driver, you could be a weatherman, you could be a medic, you could be guards, you could be a clerk. I never even knew they existed.
Yeah. A lot of OJT.
Yeah, and I never even knew.
Okay. So how did you come to make your selection?
She made it for me.
She made it for you, and you, for your stint in the Army, you were just a...
Yes, I was 11B, which is 11 Bravo, which is an infantryman. And my main weapon was the M16, but you could get into heavier weapons. In my case, it was the M60 machine gun.
Okay.
Everybody had a 45 in those days, but then you would get other people that grenade launchers, in different types of automatic weapons.
Okay, snipers
so,
all the way down. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
they had a litany of weapons to choose from.
Okay. Now, in your Army days, where you said something about having been in Nam, did you have any overseas duty in Nam?
I was never in Vietnam. My orders got changed the very last minute when I was at Fort Lewis, Washington, to go to Korea instead. And at that point in time, the North Koreans had infiltrated South Korea and had made it all the way to the presidential palace when President Park was there. So there was a shift to take some of the men and send them to Korea to beef up those forces. And luckily or unluckily, I got picked to go to Korea, where I went to a place called Camp Ames, which was basically a depot where they had a lot of munitions, some really big munitions, and my job was there to be a truck driver and to be a guard.
Okay.
And I was there in Korea for 13 months. Then I had a month off, so I went home. I took my 30 days leave. And then from there, I went to Fort Riley, Kansas, where they had a mechanized infantry division. And I became an armored personnel carrier driver, APC. And I spent my rest of my career driving those things around, which was only for about 6-7 months. And then the grateful day that I got out.
Yeah.
When
you just said APC, it reminds me of way back in my day.
Yeah.
APC was an all-purpose capsule. If you had it,
Yeah.
you took one or you swallowed it and cured everything. If it didn't, they buried you.
Sure.
But anyway, okay, now that you've gone that far, what happened between then and then you decided to join the Air Force Reserve and really make something?
I had a 17-year break. So I got out of the Army and said, I need to go to school.
GI Bill?
Yes.
Good.
I was a dummy. I should have just stayed in school, but sometimes you have to be hit over the head. And so I said, that's it. So I went to Stockbridge School of Agriculture at UMass Amherst, where I wanted to be a veterinarian technician. So I took animal science as my major. I graduated, and getting ready to decide to where I want to go, my stepfather had a heart attack, and I wanted to go to California because the sun never rains in California. So my mom asked me to not to delay and stay back until we could find what was wrong with them and stay with the family. So in the meantime, I needed a job. I had been a cook, dishwasher, anything that I needed money while I was going to school. So I applied for the university, and they hired me, and I became the poultryman, which was at the Tilson Farm Genetic Research Center. They used chickens for crossbreeding because they reproduce so fast. You can get your results in less than a year versus, like plant pathology and
you
some of
got 3 or 4 generations.
Yeah, and you get to eat the eggs.
So,
and I got sick of that, and in 1980, it's called the internal employee sheet. It's called the yellow sheet. A job came up because Harry Vernell was retiring.
And who was Harry, please?
Harry was the pilot plant manager for the food science department.
At UMass?
At UMass.
Okay.
And he, it comes a time in everybody's life when you retire, and it was Harry's turn. So I applied for the job. I went down for the interview. Professor Kirby Hayes, Dr. Frank Potter, and Dr. Ernie Buck gave me the interview. Come to find out, all three of them were prior Army. So
you were in.
Yes. I couldn't believe it. You know, that was one of the first real benefits of being in the military. So I got the call. They said, would you like the job? And I said, sure. It was a lot better than the poultryman that I had. It paid twice as much. That was in 1980, and I've been there ever since. Okay. I've been at the university for about 34 years.
Okay, but then the reserve, that's the stuff I want to touch on. When did you get in, and how did you get to be where you are now?
My wife and I were broke, and we needed a part-time job. We were both waiters and waitresses, and I said to my wife, well, you know, you need to get your waitress job back because you can make a lot more money than I can. No one would hire me, not Burger King, not McDonald's, not the local restaurant. So one day I was looking at the classified ads, and they said, a little article said, if prior servicemen, if you can do 20 good years before age 60, come on down. Yeah. So I said, all right, I'm going to go look at it. It doesn't hurt to look at it. Then I came back and I said, oh, honey, if you don't mind, I think I'm going to give it a try. I'll sign up for the minimum because the reserves is, 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year. So that was 36 meetings and 6 weeks of annual tour. So I said, I can do that. I'll keep my mouth shut. So for my 40th birthday, I said, I'll do it. And I retired the 29th of November, 2009, the day before I turned 60.
Now, between then and now, what did you do with respect to your specialty? Where and how did you get trained in your flight work?
I became what's called a flying medic, where you go, you fly into theater and you pick up servicemen. So they sent me to a couple of schools, and that would have been Lackland Air Force Base, Brooks Air Force Base.
When in time, by a year, if you will, so I get some chronology.
It probably started in around end of 1990, because the war was going on then, and really all training had just about stopped while they went off to the desert. Yep. So when they came back, a lot of people got out because they just couldn't take it anymore. So there were a lot of spaces to be filled. And it was very easy at that time to just raise your hand and say, I'll go to Lackland, I'll go to Brooks. And I got more and more training. And then we had what's called hospital training in those days, where you would spend time in the local hospitals or the local VA hospitals.
Okay, and civilian and or military.
Yes, and they would train you, and you start out with the basics. And I mean basics.
Which means what?
Washing floors.
In layman's language.
Washing floors, changing beds.
Okay, dishpan commando.
Yeah, doing bedpans, all the really not so technical jobs. Yeah. And then one day they say, okay, you're going to assist in this. So the nurse would be, say, giving an injection. So you would go there and you would help set up the materials that she needed. And that way you would learn what's the difference between a 10-gauge needle and a 20-gauge needle, the difference between normal saline and DW saline, all those technical things.
Okay, the things that be, again, a part of your work and trade, stock and trade.
Yes, how to change bandages, how to put on bandages, how to remove sutures. So just a little bit every day was a little different, a little more medical. And
did you find it interesting and satisfying?
Very satisfying. For the first time in my life, I really had to start helping people. And not so much as, like, helping them move or anything, but these people are ill, they're in pain, they're hurt, they're confused, and you learn to do your bedside manner. You learn to talk to them like they're normal individuals, talk to them that you're going to help them, talk to them that it's not the end of the world. You are going to get better. It might take a little while, but you will get better. And one of these days, the doctor will come in and say, it's time for you to go home.
Go home.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the relief on everybody's face is almost the same. It's like, thank God I can leave this place. Yeah. And then off they go.
Okay. Now, we have all kinds of places where you've been, and as I joked before the program, with respect to some of the things you've done, where you've done them, and I quote, too many to list, just bought a few samples. We're going to get to them later.
Okay.
But I'd like you, if you will, to give us some of the examples of when you did a fly in, fly out, what it took, how did you prepare for it, how did you know where you were going? Just, if you will, a sample trip.
If it's a training trip,
okay,
it's called the allocation board. My unit would send someone to that allocation board, and they would go to a unit because this unit has airplanes, this unit doesn't have airplanes. So they need to marry up. The unit that has the airplanes needs certain kind of, the pilot needs training, the co-pilot, the navigator, the load masters, everybody needs training. So
were they cross-trained so they could help one another in case you got hurt?
Everybody has your job.
Okay.
We needed the medical training. So at the allocation board, the two groups would get together and say, okay, on the second weekend of the month, we will fly to Westover and we will pick you up and we will fly, whether it be from point A to point B or just fly around in circles while everybody does their training.
Okay.
And the medical crew consists of five people, 2 nurses and 3 med techs. One nurse is the medical crew director, MCD, who is the paperwork person. They're the one that makes sure everything is dotted and crossed. The second flight nurse is the nurse that actually gives care. And then the 3 med techs, 2 of them assist the nurse, and the third one does their paperwork, whether it be luggage, whether it be munitions, weapons,
personal effects, whatever.
Personal effects, everything. The military cannot run without paperwork.
Tell me about it.
So you really, somebody's always doing paperwork.
Okay.
So we would train. Some days we would fly for 2 hours, and then other days we would fly across country, which could be a 1-day cross country, a 2 or 3 or 4-day cross country.
Just
from point A to point B.
Okay.
Sometimes we would fly over land because the pilot, the co-pilot, and the navigator need overland experience.
Yeah.
Other times we would fly over the ocean because everybody needs ocean, because there's no landmarks, there's no nothing out there, so they need navigational aids. Mm-hmm. They need to fly by the stars. They need to coordinate their position with satellites, and everybody needs that practice.
Plus, you need to have training, I would guess, in evacuation should you go kaput.
Yes.
That could be scary.
Yes. All of a sudden, the emergency bell would ring, and you would run your checklist. What are you supposed to do? If you have an empty plane, then you only take care of yourself and your crew members. If you have a plane that's full of sick and wounded that are on stretchers,
that's the point. Yeah.
You need to know what to do with them. Mm-hmm. And people learn best through repetition. And you run your checklist so many times, you get to memorize it so that it becomes second nature to make sure that you strap everybody in, make sure that all the cargo and all your medical equipment is strapped down. So if you do, unfortunately, hit the ground or bounce, all that stuff doesn't come flying out. Mm-hmm. Anybody who's ever flown on a commercial airplane has heard the stewardesses say, be careful of the overhead bins, because it's true. So it is practice, 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 train, train, train.
Okay, but now I want to get to the real stuff. When you're flying into Iraq, what would be your initiation with respect to, hey, we have a call to pick up 25 or 30 guys at wherever the place might be? What do you have to do to get there, load them, make sure they're safe, and get them back to Germany or whatever? Give us a run through that, just a little brief if you can.
Okay, the MCD would get the phone call that you are now activated. Your crew is going to fly to point A. So everybody gets all their equipment. They load them up in the van. First thing you do is you drive to the armory and pull your weapons. Medical technicians all carry 9mm and a couple of magazines. They usually put them inside an ammo box locked because you don't really need them until you're actually there.
Okay.
All right. So then we pack the plane with all our supplies and we take off. X amount of time later, the loadmaster or the captain or somebody will come on the loudspeaker and say, "We have now entered the war zone." So then everybody,
Black jackets.
you put on your flak jacket, you put on your survival vest, you put on your, in the old days used to be steel pot, now it's Kevlar. You check all your equipment, and then if they get closer to the airport, they shut all the lights off. So now you're flying in a tin can, and that's pitch black. The only thing you can see are the little light diodes, just here or there. And as loud as the plane is, it's stone quiet. Everybody is very quiet. They're very focused. Your mind wanders. You start thinking of this, that, and the next thing. And all of a sudden, 5 minutes to landing. Prepare for landing.
Okay.
And
pull all the straps.
Yep, everybody's all tight, and then you get the bounce when you land. The plane taxis, parks. In these days the back of the plane opens.
Yeah.
The MCD or the flight nurse will go out and meet their ground counterparts from the hospital, and that's where they will get the patient load.
Okay, they've all been triaged and so forth.
Yep.
So you've been, I would guess, when you're given your flight officers, we're going to have so many amputees, so many medical types, so many mental types, so that you kind of prepare where you're going to. Now, it must be a job loading some of these guys in the
yes.
event that they have to get them out if you do happen. And that's I've always wondered about that. How do you evacuate someone who is in very, very serious condition? But if you don't pull them out, they ain't going to make it.
No, they're not.
That's the bad part.
Yes, it is. If it's one of those questions that if something happens, you can only save so many people. The first person you save is yourself.
Right.
It doesn't nobody any good if you're
not
shot
dead.
or if you're dead.
Amen.
Okay, so what they usually do is they will go out, talk to the ground personnel, and they'll say, okay, your patient load is going to be 25-10 plus 5. So that's 25 litter patients, 10 ambulatory patients, and 5 others.
Others meaning what? Serious, very.
They could be escorts.
Okay.
They, They could be other military personnel going back and
like
deadheading here. Yeah.
Okay.
So the least wounded get loaded first. You want them all the way forward.
Okay.
The most wounded are always loaded last, so that they're offloaded when first.
Yeah.
If you have to imagine that there's a center aisle, and then there's aisles on left and right of the aircraft, loaded in. I have some pictures I showed you.
Yeah.
So if you have a person with a blown up left leg, you don't want that leg out in the aisle because it'll get hit.
No. Okay.
So you want
pre-package them in effect.
Right. So somebody's job, and many times it was mine, to say, okay, we're going to put this patient with this problem in this location.
Okay.
And you try to do it that makes the patient as comfortable as possible, but also the care that they're going to get. If someone's blown up real bad, you don't want them and they load them 5 high. You don't want that patient all the way on the 5th tier because you can't
Can't get to them.
attend to them. So you want them down where it's like number 3 position, so that you can actually go and change a bandage or add to a bandage or change the medicine or add to the medicine. The most I ever evacuated was 63. And that was during the Battle of Fallujah, Second Battle of Fallujah.
That must have been a rat race.
My knees buckled because we were told it was going to be a minimum load, just a routine flight. And when we got there, they came on and said that there's a total of 65 patients, and that includes everybody. And it was just a very well-organized chaos.
Okay, Chinese fire drill, call it.
Most of because we trained so much, you just go into automatic mode.
Okay.
And you start lifting litters. Usually the hospital has litter bearers. So you say that I want this patient now. They climb up the ramp. The MCD points to wherever.
Qu'est-ce que c'est MCD?
Mission Control Director.
Okay. All right.
And they will say, okay, there. And there's the med tech saying, come here, come here, come here. And now the 4 of them are coming up the plane, and you're going to say, I want this guy in this position. You always load from the top down.
Okay.
And then it can take a half hour, it can take a couple hours.
Okay.
Then we button up the airplane and take off. Well, we take off at night. Most missions are all done at night because in the beginning of the war, when they did it during the daytime,
You're a fair game.
yes, too many planes got shot at. Yeah. So therefore, they switched everything over to night. And we do same thing in reverse. We shut off all the lights, the plane starts to rev up, taxi, and we take off. And as soon as we get to a reasonable altitude, the lights come back on, and you start attending to your patients from that point to when you land.
Now, question, technically, are all of these airplanes pressurized? Do
Yes.
you have any problems with respect to altitude, oxygenation, and so on?
The C-141, which has since been decommissioned, was built for that. The C-130, which is still, I think they're up to J models now, has the capability of all of that. The 141 has its own built-in oxygen system. So you run your oxygen lines to the patients.
Almost like an ICU then.
Sort of. You can think of it that way.
Yeah.
They're all cargo planes. So it's like taking a cargo truck and then
Just
converting
putting
it.
wings on it.
Yep.
Well, as Bruce said, it was a flying taxi cab.
Yes.
And
On the
it's
way
crude,
down,
but yeah.
On the way down, you have all this equipment, and it can be beans to bullets. You offload all that, and then you configure the plane to take all these patients, and then now it becomes a flying ambulance, and then you fly back to wherever the location is.
Now, have you ever had to have any, I'll call it fighter escorts, like we used to have at the Bomb Command, 2 or 3 kind of guiding you along if you went through a hot zone or something like that, or did you just fly at night, pray they don't find you?
I never had an escort that I'm aware of.
Okay.
And I was, honestly, you'd be so busy, you don't even look out the window.
No, but that's what they made it safe for you. You didn't
Yes.
have to look. They were out there. They were the shepherds.
Yes, but also the airplanes fly at such speed and such altitudes today that you can get to 25,000 feet in just a few minutes.
Okay, and then it's almost a glide in if you had to cut all the engines.
Yeah. Well, then where you land is in Germany, or in Rota, Spain, or in Aviano Air Force Base, Italy. And those are all safe places. So you really don't need that fighter escort in today's.
Okay,
flight.
but it's just little thoughts. You know,
Sure.
The old man still worries a little bit now and then.
But when you go to land in Balad, Kandahar, Kuwait, Bagram, it's a roller coaster ride.
It's a hot zone.
Yeah, they want out of the air on the ground as fast as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So there were a couple white knuckle incidences, but nothing like the guys, the Marines or the Army personnel.
Oh, but still, you could be the target. You know,
Yes.
They don't know who you're aiming
Yes.
at. It's to whom it may concern is the one that scared the hell out of us.
Yes.
Okay. Any one, if you will, you can't do it in 20-something years of experience like this, but any one or two that really stand out and bring good memories, or maybe a bad memory back that you'd like to share with us?
The one
classic.
The only time that I cried on the airplane, some kid got blown up, and he was really bad. And we were flying back from Ramstein back to the United States. They allowed his family to be on the airplane. So
From Germany?
From Germany back to the United States. My job was the charge med tech, so I was in charge, like the foreman, so to speak. So the family came and asked me if they could sit next to their son. And I said, no, you can't do it until we take off. But as soon as I can, I'll let you go back. So we take off. We're up at altitude. And I went over and I said, okay, you can come back, sit next to your son. So now you got to remember that there's less room between me and you for that aisle. Their knees are within 18 inches of their son, who's got more tubes, bandages. If I remember right, he wasn't all that conscious. So I said, if you sit here, strap yourself in and, just sit here. And I went about my other regular duties. So it was time for me to check on them. And as I'm walking up through the plane, they're all crying. And the whole family's crying, and it's like, oh my God. So the closer I got, the more emotional I got. Mm-hmm. And before you know it, I turned around because I was crying. And then I walked away to recompose myself. You take a big deep breath. Remember, to do your job is to take care of you want to bring their son back.
Everybody, yeah.
So I turned around and I took a few deep breaths, sucked it up, and walked back. And if there's anything I can do for you, make them more comfortable, so on. But that's the
ultimate.
Yes, that's the one time that I cried on the plane. Don't get me started now.
I know, because I'm weepy myself. But big boys never cry, they say.
That's true.
And to that I say, bull. Now, what I'd like to do, we've just got about 10 minutes left.
Sure.
I don't know if you can see it, folks, but we have a small box of some 20 years of experience, citations, medals, and so forth. But to give you some idea of some of the goodies, explain this one, if you will. I think I can hold it up. Can you see that at all, Don?
During World War I, as the story goes, pilots were handed coins, unit coins, so that as mementos. Mm-hmm. Well, one of the pilots was shot down, and he did not get killed, but he was quite wounded, and some of the local people found him and took him in. Somebody recognized the coin, and they knew where his unit was. So they packed him up this is in World War I, they packed him up either in a carriage or some type of vehicle and brought him back to his unit, which he ultimately survived. So the tradition came.
The coin.
The coin. So every unit has a particular coin. And this one, I haven't got my glasses on. From the 773rd, I think it is. At the very bottom.
Okay, with my bad eyesight, too.
773?
773 EAES.
That's Air Force Expeditionary Evacuation Squadron.
Okay, and every guy gets one and two. How do they work it?
Most people buy their first one because they have it as a memento.
Okay.
And then if you do something a little outstanding for another unit, say you were TDY, temporary duty, and you did something very nice that they liked you, they would present you with a coin.
An attaboy.
Yes.
One attaboy, okay. That's wonderful. Now, they say in the teaching profession, publish or perish. I would like you to explain these as an example of what you did to publish so that other people wouldn't perish. That's corny, but I think it's important.
Many, many years ago, Westover used to have an airplane was called a 123. And after a certain election, all those airplanes went away. So Westover did not have any more airplanes. They got rid of those and became a C-5 base, which, if everybody knows, those are the real big cargo planes. Well, myself and a bunch of friends got together and said, well, we could do evacuations on those if people would let us. So after a lot of arm twisting and politics, they said, okay, you can try it. So we got together and we started the first C-5 air medical evacuation program.
In the
whole Air Force. And many of those people have retired and gone on to bigger, better things, which meant that I was one of the last standing. So myself, and at the time it was Captain Eddie Morales, local guy, we put together this book, and it's C-5 Emergency Ground Evacuation Maintenance Training Guides. It tells you almost everything that the ordinary person, ordinary crew member would need, from sitting to
offloading, what to do in case of.
Yes, medical stuff, flight controls. If something happened and you're the only person left live, you've got to know. And so if you grab this book, the ordinary person with some experience would know what to do.
Okay.
Well, we went to places called JRTC, Joint Readiness Training Center at Fort Polk, Louisiana. And it is a place where you do the most live training that you possibly can. So we got together and said, well, get so many people that don't know what they're doing, we need to make a manual. So I became a observer controller, which is basically kind of like a referee. You've seen them in the movies. You're dead, you're alive.
Called the mother-in-law in family language.
So myself and Eddie Morales and a couple of other people made this. I was an OC for 15 rotations, and we would hand these out so that when you went back to your unit, you would know things like how to don on your chemical gear, what MOP levels are, which are for chemical fighting, what abbreviations, just everything that we could think of that you would need to know that would make your life easier. We made these and we handed them out to the units.
Now, are they authorized, if you will, for distribution throughout the system? Or was it the basis of some other command manuals?
They are an addenda. They are not an official Air Force publication.
But they tell you what to do.
Yes.
Okay.
And we kept it that way because we could make mistakes.
Oh, yeah.
And if it's not 100%.
Not in the book, who the hell knows?
Yeah. So
my French.
So we handed those out, and I got another award for it.
Okay, now to this one, there's always some humor, if you will. Dan, I'll hold this up carefully, and don't smirk, but tell us exactly what this is all about. You got to listen closely here, folks.
I was running the program, and we needed to have a training flight. So I said to all of those people, come on, let's go on the flight. We'll train. We're only going to fly down to Otis Air Force Base. We're going to do the quick turn, and it should only be, 3-4 hours. Well, we took off. We flew to Otis. We landed, and the plane broke. So now we can't get home. So I said, let me take everybody's picture, and they showed me their appreciation, so to speak, about what they thought about that.
Thumbs up. Three digits to the left.
We ended up driving home. So a 4-hour flight turned out to be a 12-hour day.
Now, did you get any relief along the way, like TDY travel time?
No.
Okay. Now, being a little more serious for a moment. A lot of guys have fruit salad. Some of us don't even know what they're all about, but I'd like to read the citation. I'm not embarrassing you, I hope, but with my good eyes. The United States of America, to all who shall see these presents, greetings. This is to certify that the President of the United States of America, authorized by Executive Order 11 May 1942, has awarded the Air Medal to Master Sergeant Daniel Kibe for meritorious achievement while participating in aerial flight. Then it goes to list all the different kinds of things and aggravations that they went through, so that once they got the wheels up, they knew where they were going, and they landed and they delivered their cargo, wounded and people in need of help. That's a nice little piece of paper.
Thank you.
And this is another little one, hard to come by. Again, the same prologue. The Aerial Achievement Medal to Master Sergeant Dan for sustained meritorious achievement while participating in aerial flights. Then they list some dates from here to there and what they did. Enduring Freedom, Iraqi Freedom, Desert Storm, and so on. Little pieces of paper. In the box there's some 20 years accumulation of kudos, wonderful things, of service, well appreciated. All I can say from the guys around here,
Oh, thank you.
express it, buddy.
Well, thank you.
It's been a pleasure having you here.
It's been, for a draft dodger, it's been a wonderful experience, and I highly recommend it to everybody.
Okay, but you don't have to be a draft dodger because he flunked. He couldn't even drive the draft. But
No.
seriously, guys, as we said before, and you gals, we owe so much to the women, waves, wax, winds, and nurses. Please, if you can and will, come. We'll do all we can to make it worth your while if you'll share with us. Bob Stevens again saying thank you. Hope it's been to your interest. Come and see us. Goodbye.